Ancient glyphs speak truths, too jagged for daylight. Not forward, not back down, always down. Into the Maw with Cecilia Hunt.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Into the Maw with myself, Cecilia Hunt. And today I wanted to explore a little bit about one of the most misunderstood but also one of the most transformative concepts within Draconian philosophy. And that would be self-deification, or as it's sometimes called, becoming your own god or godlike consciousness. Now, I know those terms can trigger some people, the becoming your own god or godlike consciousness, and they can and often provoke fear, judgment, dismissal, sometimes even from those within the occult itself, right? But the truth is that these ideas behind this concept aren't about ego, vanity, or narcissism. Like, that's not what they're for or what they're about at their base or their core, right? They're more about sovereignty and responsibility and mastery of oneself. Now, when I say mastery of oneself, I understand nobody can be a master at anything, okay? I get it. I digress, okay? It's just the concept itself that we're talking about today. So in this episode, I'll tell you guys real quick what exactly I plan on covering in this episode. So first, we're going to go over what self-deification truly means within Draconian philosophy. We will also cover why these ideas are misjudged and even demonized by outsiders, including, but not limited to, love and light practitioners, or even right-hand path practitioners and occultists, and even non-occultists, okay? We're also going to cover the psychological and spiritual principles that make self-mastery and godlike consciousness or self-deification even possible. But I want to push it a little farther with you guys, because although I want to emphasize the reality of what self-deification really is, I also feel it necessary to not only tell you guys the benefits, but also express the cons and the dangers as well. So we will go over the dangers of imbalance, ego inflation, narcissistic drift is also one that often can happen. And finally, we will reflect on things like balance, discipline, responsibility, and how they are mandatory compasses for walking the path of self-deification. So breathe, settle in, whatever, and let's just get on with it, okay? So, what self-deification really means, in order to really go over that, we have to start by addressing the heart of it, right? So what does it actually mean to deify yourself at its core? Well, so a lot of people take this and automatically think, oh, you are making yourself godlike. You think you're a god. You think you're above everybody else. That's just, nope. I am not putting myself in the same classification as Thor or fucking Hera, or I'm not doing that, okay? Like, that's not what this is. Calm yourself. So self-deification is the conscious act of claiming your own divinity. So that might sound really dramatic, but in Draconian philosophy, it's not a fantasy or an ego trip. It's a recognition of something fundamental. And That is that you are already a capable being of creation, transformation, and mastery. Okay? And again, we touched that mastery word. I'm not a fan of it either, but we're talking mastery as an idea, not literal. Okay? Becoming godlike, like the godlike consciousness, isn't about crowns or thrones or, almighty power. Okay? It's about your own internal sovereignty and becoming the ultimate authority within your own life. Right? So, think about it. So, every action, every choice, every decision you make, that in itself is power. So, to acknowledge and refine that power, to wield it with awareness rather than unconscious habit, that is the essence of self-deification. It's more so about standing fully in your shadow and in your light, right? So you have to really merge the two, and understanding both and learning to integrate them into a single conscious being, right? So there's a lot of shadow integration that goes in with it, and there's a lot of shadow work, obviously, and there's also a lot of constant reality checking for yourself through the entire thing, right? So it's not just something that you start out with, you do a couple rituals and you're like, I'm self-deified. No. Nope, you're not bona fide. Just sit back down. You got to keep going. You got to keep doing it. It's a constant effort throughout your entire life, right? Because we are human and we do get self-conscious and we do, suffer through traumas. And just because you healed all your past traumas doesn't mean you're not going to go through more later and then have to fucking redo the whole thing, right? Unfortunately. Anyway, there's a difference between being a pawn of circumstance and becoming the architect of your own existence, right? So think of it like you can either go with the flow and just do whatever the fuck everybody around you is doing and wants you to do, or you could be the architect of your own life and take credit for yourself, your actions, take accountability, improve, change, grow, and you are in control of everything within yourself. You're in control of your emotions, you're in control of your feelings, you're in control of your actions, of your words, etc. Nobody else can control them. Nobody else can force you to say something or do something that you don't want to do. There's a lot of, autonomy that goes in with self-deification, and we will touch on that in a little bit. This is why the term godlike is so useful when we're talking about self-deification. Excuse me. It doesn't mean that you're literally a god, that's not what it means. It's a descriptor for the level of self-consciousness and self-sovereignty and the responsibility that you own, embody, and achieve, right? So to be godlike is to act with clarity, sovereignty, awareness, to move through life fully present in your choices, but also in your consequences. So in self-deification, one question that I got asked the other day was, if self-deification is so profound, then why does it provoke so much fear and misunderstanding? And the answer to that is actually really simple. It's because power scares people, right? Especially in this day and age. And for centuries, systems of control, whether they're religious, social, or even some occult hierarchies, have relied on obedience, submission, and hierarchy. And the idea that a human being can consciously claim divinity within their self and sovereignty over themselves disrupts that very system. So even within the occult, you may hear people talk about, you can't deify yourself, only a god can grant that. That is the hierarchy masquerading as spirituality. Okay? It's still the same framework that humans bow, submit, defer, etc. So for love and light or right-hand path practitioners, self-deification is often labeled as dangerous, egotistical, or narcissistic, and it's because it challenges their very paradigm. Okay? So on the right-hand path, divinity is typically externalized. So you worship, honor, emulate a higher power. The path emphasizes submission, guidance, and alignment with an external cosmic order, right? To claim divinity within oneself is seen as like hubris or heretical or how dare you kind of thing. And in their moral lens, hubris is not just pride, it turns into spirituality's version of sin, essentially. But there is a key distinction here, okay? Because self-deification is not hubris when it is grounded in self-awareness and responsibility. Now, I make that point very specifically because there are people that use self-deification or practice self-deification, and they're not grounding, they're not balancing, they are not self-aware for shit, and they do not take responsibility for anything. Not everybody that practices something is going to fucking do it right, okay? And again, we are all human, so even if you are doing it right to the best of your ability, you're still gonna have days where you slip up. You're still gonna have moments where you're like, fuck, that came out wrong. Like, I sounded like an asshole. We're human, you guys. You gotta give yourself a little grace and a little leeway, but also take accountability and have that self-awareness to know, you know what? Yeah, I sounded like a fucking asshole. I am so sorry. You know, I didn't mean it that way, but also, you know, take accountability for portraying it that way and then fucking correct it, right? Instead of the alternative where it's like, well, you just misunderstood me and that's a you fucking problem. It's like, well, hold on. So, self-deification is the act of claiming your own sovereignty, right? So it's not about dismissing the value of others or the world around you. It's about emulating and embodying your own self-sovereignty, okay? And it's a recognition that to grow, evolve, or, you know, really integrate within yourself or with your higher self or your shadow self or whatever, right? You must first stand as the ultimate authority in your life. And I say this to a lot of people in a lot of different ways for a lot of different reasons, where I say you are the driver of your own car. You are the master of your own sails, right? You are the pilot of your own fucking plane, right? Nobody can tell you what to do with your body. Nobody can force you to do or say or feel anything, right? I mean, there are some, like, if you have a pew-pew to your head, that's a little different. But that's not what we're talking about, okay? Like, I'm talking about, like, day-to-day life. Like, the decisions and choices that you make. The things that you choose to say. The actions that you choose to take. Those are all on your own responsibility for the actions themselves and whatever consequences or rewards come with them afterwards. But this whole idea threatens anyone whose power depends on keeping you beneath them, right? So if somebody doesn't like the fact that you turn divinity inwards and you find, you know, whether you call it self-worship or self-divinity or self-deification or whatever the fuck you call it. I don't fucking care what you call it. But if somebody finds that that triggers them, that means that they are either stuck in a system of oppression, they are stuck in a mindset of the oppressed, they're stuck in a victim mentality because they want you to be beneath them, or the biggest one is they want control over you, therefore they don't want you to emulate your own fucking power, right? So whether that's a hierarchical kind of thing, like if you're in like an order or a coven or whatever, and they don't agree with it, they don't like it, and they want you to just get in line with all the other ducks and be a duck in the row. Well, you know what? My ducks are not in a fucking row, sir. My ducks are not in a fucking row, but I'll take credit for that shit. Okay? Like, my ducks are not in a fucking row. But I tell you what, they all have a job and they all know what the fuck they're doing. They just might not be in a fucking row, right? So, we can break this down psychologically as well. So, to become godlike or to become your own god requires integration of the self, like I said before. And this means confronting all of the aspects of your psyche, your light, your shadow. Which, this can be a very hard thing to do for many. This can be something that not many people can accomplish. And I don't say that to restrict people from it or to gatekeep it, but a lot of people have a hard time with it. And it's because your shadow itself is everything that you've been taught to reject. It is fear, anger, desire, ambition, selfishness, and even rage, right? It's facing your traumas and, you know, hugging yourself instead of cursing yourself or telling yourself you're ugly, or like, it's really becoming the best friend of even the deepest, darkest parts of yourself, right? And accepting why that part of yourself is that way, but also not allowing yourself to let it control you, okay? Because Draconians, like as a Draconian practitioner, you don't ignore the shadow, okay? You examine, you understand it, and you integrate it. That is like one of the biggest parts of the Draconian path and Draconianism, whether not you're like any of the branches of Draconianism, whether you're practicing Cliffofic Draconianism or traditional Draconianism or Setianism. Wow, I can't talk today. Or Luciferian Draconianism, whatever it is, right? Whatever branch of Draconianism you are practicing, okay? It is all about integration, understanding, and examination of your shadow self and becoming one and integrating that shadow self, okay? And it has a lot of benefits, but yes, it has a lot of risks and a lot of danger that goes along with it if you're not doing it properly, safely, if you're not grounding and balancing yourself. And I just want to point this out right here, okay? If you are going through shadow work or shadow integration or whatever, okay? It is completely and utterly okay to seek medical professional help, okay? Do not let anybody, and I mean fucking anybody, okay? And this is a big thing in self-deification as well that we're talking about is, you know, you are the master of yourself. You know when you need fucking help, okay? Needing help does not make you weak. Okay, especially when it comes to shadow integration and shadow work. If you need help from a licensed therapist, if you need help from medical professionals because something feels wrong or you feel overwhelmed, seek that professional help. Okay? I'm serious. It does not make you weak. It does not mean that you're doing it wrong. Okay? It does not make you less than somebody that didn't need to seek a therapist. If you need it, do it. Okay? Because if you get to the point where you recognize and acknowledge that you need that medical or professional help from either a therapist, a psychotherapist, or a doctor, or whatever it might be, if you need that help and you don't get it, and you keep pushing yourself, it will end so catastrophic for you. Okay? And I don't mean that like to fearmonger or scare or whatever. Maybe I do. I don't know. But like, just take it seriously, okay? Because your brain and your mind, it's a very strong organ, a very strong piece of your body, right? But it is also a piece of your body that can fracture and be altered and change very drastically in short periods of time. Okay? So don't traumatize yourself with shadow work or shadow integration. If you have the means, seek the help, okay? Even if it's friends or family or whatever it might be. Seek help if you need it, because it does not make you weak. It does not make you less than. It does not mean you're doing it wrong. Everybody's different, okay? And that's perfectly okay. So, yeah, because if you refuse to do the shadow work, okay, so now we go to if you refuse to do the shadow work at all. Your consciousness can fracture, okay, so you may gain knowledge or power or, you know, wisdom, whatever, knowledge and wisdom, whatever, right? But it'll always be partial. It'll always be unstable. My voice just cracked. It'll always be reactive rather than sovereign because you're not doing that shadow work. Does that make sense? So, self-deification is about transforming chaos into conscious power. It's about learning discipline, restraint, and the weight of the conscience, right? But it's also about responsibility. Responsibility is a big part of that. Because to become godlike is to accept that your life is your creation, right? And no, I don't mean like you created yourself. Okay, that's not that's what I'm meaning, okay? I'm not meaning you birthed yourself. You didn't create yourself literally and physically. But like, your life is your creation, right? So you are in control of where your life goes, right? On whether or not you follow your goals, if you follow your dreams, if you do this or that. It's like that famous saying, like, everything that I almost said everything happens for a reason. That's not the saying I was looking for, you guys. My brain malfunctioned. But it's like, that saying that tarot readers or divinators always, preach and explain, right? So your path may look like this, your future may look like this, but even the slightest thing can alter that, right? So if you walk left instead of right, your whole future can change, right? If you say something bad to one person one day instead of just shutting your mouth or being fucking nice, your whole future can fucking change, right? You run a red light, instead of stopping at the damn light, your whole future can change. So that's what it means when we talk about accepting that your life is your creation, because every action you take, every word you speak creates your future, okay? Creates the life that you're living in. No one else is in charge of your destiny, not God's, not fate, no moral authorities outside of yourself. And that is one of the things with self-deification, is you don't believe that the gods have control over your fate. You don't believe that, destiny is a thing. Like, you believe in yourself. You believe in your own sovereignty. You have control. You have free will. Like, it's all within you. Okay? That responsibility is literally the crucible of what true self-deification is, or what it's supposed to be. Without it, the power can become tyranny, okay? And the path can become dangerous, like we talked about a little bit before. And we'll talk about it more in a minute. Like right now, when we move on to... I'm just like reading through my notes. Right now, when we move on to self-deification versus narcissism. This is one of the biggest fucking things, okay, you guys? Like, I hear so many people saying, self-deification is just narcissism with a pretty title. It's not. It's not. It's not, okay? Because even if you just go off of what we already have discussed, okay? There is a difference, okay? So this is one of the biggest, like I said, the biggest misconceptions of self-deification is relating it to narcissism. But self-deification is not narcissism, you guys. I want to emphasize that so fucking loudly, okay? Narcissism is a fragile, ego-demanding, constant validation, psychological disorder, okay? Self-deification is sovereignty born from self-sovereignty and shadow integration, not from attention or praise. Those two things are vastly different, okay? However, and this is very important, if somebody already has narcissistic tendencies, or if they are themselves a narcissist, then the path of self-deification can amplify those traits if approached without self-awareness, okay? So, unchecked ego can lead to delusion, arrogance, and isolation, okay? And within self-mastery, or self-deification, or self-sovereignty, your ego is kind of like rage. Ego and rage are not necessarily just thrown off the boat as evil, or as bad, or as negative. They are examined and integrated just like the shadow, because they're part of that shadow, right? So you can convince yourself that godlike means superiority over others rather than over yourself. But the difference is very, very critical, okay? Because your ego says, I am above you, where deification says, I am responsible for me, okay? I am responsible for me. And anybody that you have responsibility over, like if you have kids or whatever. But besides the point, we're getting off track, okay? One is comparative, okay? And the other one is conscious. So you're not, as somebody who practices self-deification, you're not saying, I am above you, I have authority over you. You're saying, I am responsible for me. Like, me. I am the master of my own path, my own life. I drive my own fucking car. I sail my own damn boat, okay? Nobody else can get me from point A to point B except myself. Nobody else can derail me unless I allow them to, kind of thing. So, in Draconianism, and again, it doesn't matter what branch, typically, we recognize that power amplifies what is already inside of us. And that is why it is a constant cycle. Like, it's a never-ending thing that you constantly do throughout your whole existence, throughout your whole life, moving forward once you start this journey. It's not something that you just do a ritual for and you're like, oh, I'm done. No, it's a constant thing. Because power amplifies what's already inside of us, right? So with more wisdom, with more knowledge, becomes more power, right? And if you are not integrating, and if you are not balancing and grounding yourself within that power, and you are not taking the steps to turn that power into sovereignty as well as mastery, then you're not going to be improving. You're going to be feeding the negativities within yourself, right? So if you're not doing that shadow work, you're only feeding the shadow without communication, right? So think of it like you have a stray dog, okay? You have a stray dog, and it's a very vicious stray dog, okay? And you put this stray dog in a kennel. This stray dog never shuts up. It's always barking. It's always growling. Anytime you get closer to the kennel, it attacks the kennel to get to you. All that jazz, right? Now, you have to feed the dog, right? You took responsibility over this dog, and you wanted this dog in your house, or you wanted to help take care of this dog or get it better, whatever. So you're feeding the dog, right? But feeding the dog does not entail that you are necessarily calming the dog. You're just feeding the dog so it doesn't die, right? Now, if you sit with the dog and you talk to the dog at least a little bit every day, let the dog know you're a safe person, as well as continue to feed it. Maybe give it treats when it doesn't bark, right? You're integrating to that dog calm, patience, understanding, etc., right? But if you just yell at the dog, kick the cage, or show aggression, then the dog will continue and possibly hurt you if it either gets out or bites you when you try to feed it. This reflects how your inner world is chaotic, undisciplined, or inflated with pride. Deification will only magnify those flaws. So does that make sense? So if you are only feeding it, it's only going to get worse. But if you are integrating, and if you are sitting down and you are, working on it, with it, then everything will flow easier, things will be easier for you, etc. Because if it is disciplined, integrated, and reflective, then it magnifies sovereignty and wisdom, rather than the chaotic, undisciplined pride, ego, whatever. So, is it possible that there are narcissists that practice self-deification? Yeah, there's narcissists everywhere, in fucking everything, all over the fucking world, unfortunately. We cannot avoid them, we can't get away from them. They just exist without anyone's fucking desire for them to exist, unfortunately. But one of the biggest parts of self-deification is self-responsibility, right? Narcissists don't comprehend self-responsibility or self-accountability, you guys. They don't. That's like basic narcissism 101. Like, just saying. So now we can move on to what self-deification or becoming your own god looks like in practice, right? So, again, this is not like a simple ritual or a spell or a proclamation that you announce to the world, right? It's a process of conscious evolution. So it's a constant battle, a constant feat that you're working on every single day. It's a mountain you're going to be climbing for the rest of your life, essentially. And what self-deification means every day in day-to-day life, it looks like, owning your own choices. Owning your choices fully. And that means the rewards and the consequences of those choices. And understanding that consequences, whether they're good or bad, arise from your actions, right? It also means honoring your personal truth while remaining aware of the interconnectedness of life itself. Okay? Because developing a godlike sense of authority within yourself, it's not about holding it over others, but over your own mind, body, and spirit. Okay? So if you're holding it over others, you're doing it fucking wrong. Just saying. I don't care who that pisses off. If you're holding your self-deification as a status quo over others, you're doing it fucking wrong and you're an edgelord, okay? And there are people out there, I'm just saying. But that's not what true self-deification, what the purpose of it is, okay? It's also about integrating morality as an internal guidance, not an external enforcement. Does that make sense? So the consciousness is awareness without fear, and sovereignty without arrogance, and power without cruelty. Which, when you kind of think about it, it's funny that it's Draconianism, because Draconian means cruelty. But that's besides the point, okay? My ADHD brain is going bing, 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 bing. I swear I have a Pac-Man in my head just like running around. It's bad, guys. But in all seriousness, this is central to Draconian philosophy. Now, does this mean that if you are Draconian, you have to practice self-mastery or self-deification? No. You don't have to practice self-deification to be Draconian or to practice Draconian philosophy, okay? Draconian philosophy is just deeply rooted in self-deification. You can easily extract that part out and just say, I'm not down with that. That don't align with me. I don't think I can handle that. Whatever. That's totally valid. But Draconian philosophy within itself still embodies all of that shadow work. And it still embodies the taking accountability for your own shit. It still embodies all of the shit that self-deification embodies. Okay? Because the dragon is the symbol of ultimate sovereignty. The one who faced chaos, mastered itself, and rose above limitation. So to emulate that archetype is to claim your own divinity responsibly. And I think one of the biggest reasons why Draconianism is so misunderstood and so seen as like taboo or edgy or dark or whatever is, well, it is dark, but I mean, I feel like it's because self-deification is something that a lot of practices and a lot of people stick their nose up to because they just either don't understand it or they are the people that like being stuck or like having control over others. So when we talk about the path being misunderstood by others, okay, A lot of people see it as dangerous or egotistical, like we talked about before, because they measure morality and spirituality by obedience and service to an external force. So, from their perspective, a human claiming divinity is stepping outside of their moral framework. And this looks like egotism, it looks dangerous, it looks, edgy, it looks edgelord, it looks fucking dangerous, it looks bad, it looks fucking evil, whatever. But the key is that the danger that they perceive is mostly their own projection, because self-deification isn't about rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's about standing fully in your truth and integrating your shadow and your light to evolve consciously. That's the difference between wisdom and dogma within Draconianism. And the path doesn't demand submission to authority, it demands submission to self-truth, discipline, and personal responsibility. But let's be honest here, okay? Because this is where we are going to step into talking about the dangers and the pitfalls, because they are very important. Because Draconianism and self-deification specifically are not without their risks and their danger. So things like ego inflation, where, you think you're untouchable or superior, or narcissistic drift, where you confuse sovereignty with domination over others. There's also avoidance of reflection, where you skip shadow work completely, you skip the self-assessment, and you skip accountability. You just want the power, right? And then there's isolation. Isolation is believing that claiming godlike consciousness frees you from learning from others or frees you from accountability, okay? Even in mythology, you guys, gods are held accountable 9 times out of 10 for their bullshit, okay? But these dangers aren't reasons to fear self-deification, they are tests, okay? So they reveal weaknesses, they illuminate your flaws, and they create opportunities for you to refine yourself. So ultimately, the lesson of self-deification is fucking balance, okay? You have to make sure that you're balancing and you're grounding all of the things, okay? Because it's tempered with reflection, okay? It's sovereignty coupled with accountability, and it's consciousness practiced without arrogance, and humility without subjugation. Okay, that is really important. And really, to walk this path successfully, if I could speak, is to own your own choices, own your actions, own your consequences, own your fucking rewards, face your shadow, refine your ego so that it serves your consciousness and not the other way around, okay? You are in control of your emotions are not in control of you. That is really important. And understanding and claiming divinity does not remove you from responsibility, it amplifies your responsibility, okay? You have nobody to blame but yourself. Like, it amplifies your responsibility. It does not negate you from responsibility. Because in Draconian philosophy, this is the essence of becoming godlike. It's not a title, it's not a way of being, it's not imagining yourself or thinking yourself as an actual fucking deity or an actual god. It is taking fucking responsibility and owning your sovereignty and your autonomy and all that good jazz. So, in reflection, what is self-deification really? Like, what is it really? It is honestly just truly the conscious act of standing as the ultimate authority in your own life. That includes your bodily autonomy, that includes your choices, that includes your emotions, that includes everything, okay? It's facing your shadows, mastering your ego, and integrating your light and your dark. It's responsibility, sovereignty, and conscious evolution. It is not narcissism, it is not ego worship, and it is not rebellion for its own sake, okay? It is a path that challenges, refines, and transforms you if you allow it to, and if you are balancing and grounding yourself properly. And yes, it will be misunderstood by some. Always has been, always will be. Especially by, light-based practitioners or those who worship external authorities. But I want to make sure that I emphasize this really quick and make sure that I get this in here. Because I had this question recently in regards to self-deification, and the question was, if you practice self-deification, does that mean that you cannot or do not worship other entities or other deities, right? Because the worship goes to yourself, essentially, and, you hold yourself to godlike standards, whatever. And the answer is, it can be complicated, but it's not complicated at the same time. So you can still worship external forces, okay? But you do not view those external forces as having authority over you. You worship external forces because you choose to, not because you feel submissive or obligated to do so. Does that make sense? So I can worship, Horus, for example. But I also practice self-deification. So my worshiping of Horus isn't a submissive worship. It is not me assuming or placing authority in him over my life, its outcomes, or decisions. Does that make sense? So you can still worship external forces while practicing self-deification. It's just a different mindset than your typical worship, if that made sense. But that is completely okay, alright? Because their misunderstanding does not diminish your journey, okay? The dragon waits for no one. The path of self-deification is yours to walk, carefully, consciously, and responsibly. And please remember that claiming your divinity amplifies your responsibility. It is not permission to dominate. It is not a call to master yourself, embody your power, or it is not. It is a call to, master yourself, embody your power, and walk in your truth. And even though that is something that, is an ongoing, constant thing, you're never going to master yourself, right? But it's the journey, it's the concept, right? You are not small. You are not meant to kneel. You are meant to rise, and you are meant to become the sovereignty within your own life, within it, with awareness and with accountability. Okay, so thank you guys for listening. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody ready to understand what self-deification is and what it represents, what it means within Draconianism, or just in general. But until next time, I am Cecilia Hunt, and walking beside the dragon and toward the flame, down, down, always down, into the maw. Thank you guys. Bye.